At 55, Catherine Zeta-Jones still has the beauty, talent, and elegance that once made Hollywood fall at her feet. Her career has spanned decades. Her performances have won her awards, and her presence still turns heads on any red carpet. But beneath the glamour lies a story few truly understand. It's not a tale of faded fame or scandal. It's one of battles fought in silence, heartbreak hidden behind smiles, and resilience forged in the public eye. Some call it strength, others call it tragedy. Either way, what you're about to hear will change the way you see her forever. For most people, a birthday is just a moment, cake, laughter, and a snapshot for social media. But when Catherine Zeta-Jones turned 55 this year, the celebration carried a weight that couldn't be captured in any photograph. She shares her birthday with her husband, Michael Douglas, who is now 80 years old. For more than 2 decades, they've celebrated side by side, a rare coincidence that has always felt like fate. On the surface, it's a love story you'd expect to see in a movie, 2 Hollywood icons, aging gracefully together. But to those who have followed their journey closely, this year's birthday wasn't just a party. It was a quiet reminder of everything they've endured to still be standing together. The images from that night told 2 stories. In one, there was the sparkle, the designer gowns, the champagne, the perfect smiles. In the other, there was the unspoken truth. Years of personal battles, illness, and the strain of living under a microscope. Their journey together has been anything but effortless, marked by moments where their marriage seemed ready to collapse, and times when Catherine's own well-being was pushed to its limits. It's not that their joy is fake. If anything, it's the opposite. Every smile is earned, every shared glance hard-won, but those moments are also layered with the scars of what they've faced. And as the candles flickered out on that 55th birthday, the world saw only the celebration. What they didn't see was the story still unfolding behind the scenes, one that would prove far more complicated than the photographs suggested. The first cracks in Catherine Zeta-Jones's picture-perfect life appeared more than a decade ago. In 2010, her world shifted overnight when Michael Douglas was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer. It wasn't just a medical crisis. It was a life-altering event that placed their entire future in doubt. The man she loved, the father of her children, was suddenly fighting for his life, enduring aggressive treatments that left him physically drained and emotionally fragile. Catherine stood by his side in public, smiling through interviews, but in private, every day felt like a test of endurance. For months, their home became a place of whispered conversations, late-night fears, and cautious hope. Catherine once admitted that she tried to remain strong for her children, but the pressure was suffocating. She knew the cameras were waiting for the smallest sign of weakness, and the weight of that expectation was crushing. Then, in 2011, she revealed something even more personal. After years of quiet struggle, Catherine confirmed she had been diagnosed with bipolar II disorder, a mental health condition characterized by deep, prolonged lows and sudden bursts of high energy. Her openness was groundbreaking at the time, but it also made her a target for gossip outlets, hungry to sensationalize her vulnerability. By 2013, the pressure reached a tipping point. Catherine voluntarily checked herself into a treatment facility to stabilize her mental health, a decision that was both courageous and risky in an industry obsessed with perfection. While some applauded her honesty, the tabloids latched onto the story, turning her recovery into a spectacle. Every public appearance afterward was scrutinized. Every smile questioned, was she really better, or just acting for the cameras? For Catherine, it was a reminder that surviving illness, whether her own or her husband's, wasn't the end of the battle. The hardest part was learning to live again under the unrelenting gaze of a world that refused to forget her lowest moments. But just when she thought she could begin rebuilding, another storm was waiting, one that would strike at the very core of her marriage. By mid-2013, the strain on Catherine and Michael's marriage had become impossible to ignore. The years of illness, media intrusion, and constant pressure had left scars that even love couldn't easily heal. Then came the announcement that stunned fans around the world. Catherine Zeta-Jones and Michael Douglas were separating. It was hard for people to reconcile. The couple who once seemed untouchable, who had shared every birthday and milestone for over a decade, were suddenly living apart. The headlines were relentless. Some pointed to Michael's health struggles, others to Catherine's mental health battle, and still others to the 25-year age gap between them. The truth, as Catherine hinted years later, was less about scandal and more about survival. They simply needed space to breathe. During their separation, Catherine focused on her children and took on select roles that kept her close to home. Michael, meanwhile, devoted himself to regaining his health and finding his footing after cancer. They kept their distance in the public eye, but behind closed doors, they never completely severed the connection. They still spoke regularly, still shared family moments, and still looked out for each other in ways only two people with a shared history can. Then quietly and without fanfare, something changed. In 2014, they began appearing together again, not in a staged, PR-driven way, but naturally, as if the time apart had cleared the fog between them. Their reconciliation wasn't the grand Hollywood fairy tale people expected. It was a slow, deliberate rebuilding of trust. They returned to each other not as the couple they once were, but as two people who had seen the worst life could throw at them and decided they still belonged together. When Catherine spoke about it later, she didn't call it a comeback or a fix. She called it a choice, one they made every day to keep showing up for each other. It was a quieter love than before, less about glamour and more about endurance. And for Catherine, it was proof that even in the harshest conditions, some bonds can survive, if both people are willing to keep fighting for them. But as strong as this new chapter seemed, Catherine knew her public image was still tangled with the old wounds. And soon, a new wave of attention, both good and bad, was about to pull her back into the spotlight. Through every headline, every hospital visit, and every whispered rumor, there was one role Catherine Zeta-Jones never wavered in: being a mother. For all the red carpets and award shows, nothing could match the pride she felt watching her children grow. Dylan and Karis, the two children she shares with Michael Douglas, became her anchor when everything else felt uncertain. They weren't just part of her life, they were her compass, the reason she kept pushing forward when it would have been easier to step away from the spotlight entirely. Raising children in the glare of Hollywood is almost impossible without sacrificing their privacy. Yet Catherine and Michael managed to keep their family life remarkably grounded. She shielded Dylan and Karis from the industry's harsher edges, letting them have as close to a normal upbringing as possible. That meant limiting public appearances, avoiding unnecessary press, and making sure that, at home, they were just a family. No scripts, no cameras, no red carpet personas. Every now and then, Catherine would share a glimpse into their world, a family vacation photo, a candid laugh caught on camera, and those rare moments revealed something deeper. The smile she wore in those pictures wasn't the polished expression she'd mastered for premieres. It was softer, warmer, and entirely unguarded. Her pride reached new heights in 2022 when Dylan graduated from college, marking a milestone not just for him, but for the entire family. Catherine often spoke about how emotional that day was, watching the boy she once carried on film sets now walk across a stage into adulthood. And just this year, her daughter Karis followed in his footsteps, graduating at 22 years old. For Catherine, these weren't just personal wins. They were proof that, despite all the storms, she had succeeded in giving her children stability, love, and opportunity. But while her children were stepping into their own futures, Catherine was preparing to re-enter the spotlight in a way that would reintroduce her to a whole new audience. Professionally, she was about to take on a role that would prove her star power was far from fading. Yet, even as she embraced this next chapter, the whispers about her so-called tragic life refused to disappear. And those whispers were about to grow louder than ever. As Catherine approached her 25th wedding anniversary with Michael, there was a sense of full-circle symmetry to her life. 2.5 decades of love, loss, illness, and recovery had forged something that looked unshakable from the outside. In interviews, she spoke warmly about their shared history, calling their marriage her greatest accomplishment, even above her Oscar-winning career. Professionally, she was proving she still had the star power to draw attention. Her role as the glamorous but cunning Morticia Addams in Wednesday introduced her to an entirely new generation of fans. And with production on Season 3 underway, Catherine wasn't just revisiting her past glory, she was evolving, showing the world that her talent was as sharp and magnetic as ever. But even in the middle of these triumphs, Catherine never truly escaped the shadow of her past struggles. The media's fascination with her resilience often carried an unspoken edge, framing her life as a story of survival rather than ongoing success. Every article praising her comeback seemed to subtly reference the dark chapters she had fought to move beyond. And while she smiled for the cameras, she knew those chapters weren't something she could ever erase. They were part of her story, stitched into the fabric of her life. The real question wasn't whether Catherine Zeta-Jones could keep winning over Hollywood. It was whether she could keep outrunning the narrative that her life was, at its core, a tragedy. But as the whispers grew louder, a quieter, more personal truth was emerging, one that would force her to rethink what tragedy really meant. For years, Catherine Zeta-Jones's life has been told like a Hollywood script. Beautiful star rises to fame, faces devastating personal challenges, and fights her way back into the spotlight. The headlines have painted her as a woman whose life is as dramatic off-screen as it is on, a glittering success story draped in shadows. To some, that's the very definition of tragedy. But Catherine herself has never quite accepted that label. Yes, her path has been marked by moments that could have crushed even the strongest spirit. Watching the man she loves fight for his life against cancer, navigating her own mental health struggles in front of the world, enduring the relentless intrusion of tabloids eager to twist her pain into entertainment. Those moments left scars, but they also revealed something the public rarely saw: an unshakable resilience forged in the very fires that tried to consume her. In recent years, Catherine has spoken more openly about this transformation. She no longer sees her past as a chain holding her back, but as the steel she carries into every new chapter. The tragedy the media clings to is, in her eyes, the source of her strength, the proof that she can rebuild, reimagine, and reinvent herself no matter how many times life knocks her down. And perhaps that's why, at 55, she can still command a scene with the same effortless magnetism she had in her 20s. The beauty remains, yes, but so does the fight, the grit, the quiet defiance that refuses to let her be reduced to a cautionary tale. Because maybe the real tragedy isn't in the hardships she's faced. Maybe it's in how quick the world is to define someone by them. For Catherine Zeta-Jones, the story isn't over. In many ways, it's only getting more interesting. Catherine Zeta-Jones's life has never been a straight line. It's been a winding road of dazzling highs and crushing lows, of applause that filled stadiums and silences that felt endless. She has lived through battles that most would fight in private, only to have them dissected on the front pages. And yet, every time the world expected her to fade quietly into the background, she found a way to step back into the light, stronger, sharper, and more certain of who she is. At 55, her beauty still turns heads, but it's the weight behind her eyes that tells the real story. A story not just of fame, but of endurance. Not just of hardship, but of survival. Some will always look at her life and see tragedy, but for those who listen closely, there's something else. A reminder that what we call tragedy can just as easily be the foundation for triumph. And maybe that's Catherine's greatest role yet. Not the character she's played on screen, but the one she's written for herself. Catherine's story is far from over, and the twists in her journey might surprise you even more than what you've just heard. If you found her resilience as compelling as her career, you'll want to see the untold stories of other Hollywood icons who've faced their own hidden battles. Join us as we uncover the lives behind the lights. And if you don't want to miss the next chapter, make sure you're subscribed.